Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Woodman. I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. In this video, we will dive deep into phase 1 of the Inclusive Leader Continuum, Unaware. Let's begin with understanding how this phase is framed. If you are not someone who has been directly affected by adversity due to your identity, inclusion may not be one of your top priorities. There is a good chance you have not noticed all the ways you can become more involved in supporting inclusion in your organization and community, or perhaps you are wondering what you can possibly contribute or if it is your place to get involved at all. A key part of the unaware phase is understanding intent versus impact. This means that as you try to become more aware, you might find yourself focusing on your good intentions. They might make you feel better about who you are and reinforce the image you have for yourself as a good person. But unless those good thoughts make it out of your head and into supportive actions, you are not actually helping anyone. This is you hoping that change will happen on its own. This might sound obvious on paper, but many leaders are unaware that they need to bridge the gap between intent and impact to create real progress. For example, expressing good intent sometimes sounds like this. Quote, "I have Black friends, so I understand the struggles Black people face," unquote. You can genuinely have this belief, but just understanding the struggles Black people face is not enough if you just wish that racial discrimination will end forever. If you do not report racial discrimination you witness in your community or speak up when someone is dealing with racist treatment, then change will not happen and the status quo will continue. It is important to note that on some level, having personal connections to those who do not have the same access to opportunities as you do can build your empathy. A simple conversation about controversial issues or a person's painful experience of exclusion can make you aware of the struggles you might not have experienced firsthand, and it can change your mind about stereotypes. These interactions can be key in helping you move beyond intentions. However, all of us ultimately want to reach a point where we do not need firsthand accounts from excluded individuals to notice and empathize with their struggles. We need to know that anyone can face struggles with a certain thing in life, and we need to be considerate with how we are executing those things so that they are fair and equitable for everyone. Another thing we want to think about is humility, which is an important characteristic for an inclusive leader. Humility is where you admit your mistakes, learn from criticism and different points of view, and acknowledge and see contributions of others to overcome one's limitations. Essentially, the measure of your leadership is not having a perfect performance, but acknowledging an imperfect performance. This is important to realize because when you commit to personal development, you have to admit that your past behaviors and actions were not always perfect, and that is okay. Nobody can be inherently perfect at everything. In fact, being a leader does not mean having a perfectionist mindset. Being a leader means making choices you believe are the best for yourself and your community and accepting whatever results come out of those decisions. If it turns out you made a mistake with your decision, you need to acknowledge it and explain how you will do better. That shows you will grow as a person and leader. When it comes to connecting humility to inclusion, having all the right answers is not important and is not possible anyway. Wanting to learn and grow through vulnerability is part of the process. Inclusive leaders are aware of a bias towards rapid, decisive action and displays of power in their environment, but they intentionally choose the inclusive response of each situation, even when it means slowing down to ask questions, to investigate, and to take care of a situation that needs to be remedied. This is important so you are not rushing to make decisions that may not have been well thought out. Also, if you do not know the answers to everything, you do not have to speak on it and run into the risk of making things up that seem right to you. After all, we do not want leaders to speak on something they do not have personal knowledge on. However, if you know a lot of information about something, but you think you have to over-explain something to someone, despite them already knowing enough about that thing, then you run into the risk of splaining. Splaining can happen whenever a conversation occurs between two people in which one person holds, relatively speaking, more power or privilege and assumes they have the intellectual upper hand. Those who splain may have the intent of helping the situation, but the actual impact of their actions can feel condescending or insulting. This communication problem stems from the splainer lacking many things like good listening skills and patience, but it comes back to humility. Focus your attention on understanding rather than submitting to the primal urge in your brain to protect yourself at any cost. If you redirect your intention towards learning rather than getting defensive, the experience will have a more positive impact because you are expanding your mindset. When you give up the need to be right all the time and instead become curious about what you do not know, which is like suspending judgment as you educate yourself about the reality of someone else's situation, then you open yourself up to learn more about how you can ensure others feel welcomed, valued, respected, and heard. In the process, you adopt an attitude of humility. You make more informed decisions and avoid making costly mistakes or causing unnecessary harm to the people around you. With all of this information in mind, let's proceed into the internal language that keeps us in the unaware stage of the continuum. It's important to realize that any kind of change takes work. It is almost always easier to do or to keep doing whatever we've been doing than try to do something differently. But change is baked into the process of becoming an inclusive leader. It starts with accountability. Let's look at some examples of statements that might work in the moment, but ultimately keep you stuck in the status quo and prevent you from becoming a more inclusive leader. Quote, I'm buried. I don't have time to prioritize this work, unquote. Quote, I don't think we have any major issues here, unquote. Quote, I don't feel comfortable discussing this, unquote. Quote, I prefer to see past, race, gender, etc. We're all just people, unquote. Quote, this is the way we've always done things, unquote. Quote, it's not my fault I can't pronounce their name and or forget someone else's desired pronoun, unquote. Quote, I didn't mean to offend anyone, unquote. Quote, we have a head of diversity and inclusion, so we are already dedicated to making changes, unquote. Quote, we had mandatory unconscious bias training for all our members, so we have already addressed this issue, unquote. Can you see how these kinds of statements can keep you limited into this first stage? Saying these things prevents you from understanding an issue happening in your environment, or sounds like you are doing the bare minimum to stop an issue from perpetuating. Essentially, these are closed-minded thoughts that inhibit you from being inclusive. However, there is a way to shift your mindset out of this closed-mindedness. Ask yourself these questions. Am I relying or dependent on old behaviors? If so, why? In what ways do they continue to serve me? In what ways do they not? What is getting in the way of my ability to be inclusive? Am I proactively focused on trying to be more open, less skeptical, and more willing to accept rather than deflect? Am I harboring biases that affect my actions? Take some time to deeply reflect on what you are thinking right now and if those thoughts are preventing you from becoming more open-minded. Speaking of bias, let's go over how this affects inclusion. Bias can either be conscious or unconscious, but either way, it reduces our ability to make decisions based on fairness, merit, and objectivity. These biases are rooted in our primal brain, a primitive biological holdover from a time when our ancestors needed to fight or take flight from saber-toothed tigers. But modern human brains have a neocortex that gives us the ability to intellectually transcend primal urges, allowing us to self-correct for biases and to make choices based on preference or will. Still, overcoming biases can still be tough. As we live and move in this complex world, we shortcut a massive amount of data in order to make quick decisions. Viewed in its most positive aspect, bias is a way for our brains to simplify many streams of complex stimuli in a way to maximize our efficiency. The problem is that our brains often make the wrong assumptions. For instance, there is confirmation bias, which is the tendency to seek or notice information that confirms a belief and to avoid or ignore information that contradicts it. We are essentially hardwired to think we're right about things rather than consider whether we're wrong. Since this happens at the subconscious level, it's hard to catch yourself in the act and realize when you're experiencing a confirmation bias. When you have these kinds of biases, you can unknowingly misread all kinds of situations, which is especially problematic when you have team members who are counting on you. For example, suppose you see that person A makes more than person B, but you also notice that person B talks more about the time they spend with their family. Person A may spend the same amount of time with their family, but since person A does not talk about it so much, you assume person A is more focused on work than person B. So you think person B does not work as hard and they do not get paid as much as person A does. Essentially, we all have confirmation biases. Good leaders become aware of their biases, work to see fresh perspectives, and consult objective data to make sure they are making reasonable decisions. Bias does not just affect the way we see others, it affects the way we view ourselves and our aptitude in supporting diversity and inclusion. For instance, self-enhancement bias is the unconscious tendency to boost your self-esteem and overestimate your abilities, especially in situations of threat or failure. While having a positive viewpoint of yourself is great for your self-esteem, they can also be harmful if you over-exaggerate those viewpoints because they prevent you from acknowledging the truth about your capabilities. You could think you are excellent at something, but you realize you need some time to develop your skills at that thing. With inclusion, when we think we are doing a better job than we actually are, we are less likely to take further action, thus preventing real progress because we already think the job is done. There are other knowledge and awareness gaps related to bias that thwart action. For instance, there is unconscious bias, where someone has little to no awareness of their biases. As such, they do not notice when an environment supports those biases. That person may not be actively ignoring biases in the environment. It is possible that they just do not see them. To deal with unconscious bias, we need to keep our eyes open and notice when things do not look right. Making change often starts with an open dialogue, one that is not accusatory or emotionally charged, but is focused on being constructive, and one that asks, quote, "How do we build from here?" unquote. This is important because addressing bias should not automatically assume a person is bad. When someone thinks you are accusing them of being bad, that person is likely to become defensive and you will have a hard time getting at the root of the problem. After all, if you get immediately accused of doing a bad thing without getting a chance to explain your thought process, you would be less likely to cooperate with that person and have an inclusive environment. The supposition is not that you are malleolous because you have biases. Although some leaders cling to their biases, many are uncomfortable and even ashamed when they are made aware of them. It is not a proud moment when you realize that not only are you biased, but that your environment was built by only some people to work for only some people. All in all, if you can give up the need to be right, prevent yourself from becoming offended, and ask from a place of genuine curiosity, quote, "Might this be something else?" unquote, you can take the opportunity to challenge the past and use your voice to shape a better future. Now that you know how bias can keep you stuck in this unaware stage, it is important to dig into your biases to acknowledge them and better understand them. Here are some questions you can think about to help you process your bias. Where am I exposed to different points of view? Where can I go to be in a company of people who are different from me? Am I intentional about placing myself in new communities and conversations? If so, which ones? In the past, have I assumed that I am doing enough on the topic of inclusion? In which areas do I need to build my knowledge about a specific thing? Where is bias intruding on my ability to be an effective colleague, leader, or friend? After answering these questions, the next step you want to focus on is exploring your answers to gain a deeper understanding of your feelings. Our brains naturally put things into categories based on our experiences. So if you have a particularly positive or negative experience with a certain demographic, that could create feelings of bias. This is especially true if you have not had many or any other interactions with someone of a certain identity. When this happens, one of the best things you can do is to get to know the people who can help you break those stereotypes. When you get to know people on a personal level, it helps you see them as individuals rather than as just demographics. Here are some things you can do to broaden your horizons. 1, branch out and connect with more people who look different from you. Make an effort to make small talk and be more social with people outside of your regular circle. 2, attend a meeting or event that exposes you to members of different communities. 3, ask questions that get other people to open up. This can be as simple as listening and then responding with a question that invites the other person to expand. When you seem genuinely interested in other people's lives, they are more likely to freely express themselves. This moves your relationships with them beyond discussions about small things into impactful things. 4, consume different media by checking out podcasts, TV shows, books, and movies where the people involved have different identities than you do. Doing some of these things can be intimidating at first since they are brand new to you, but it gets easier as you build your network, continue to have a constant presence in your community, and become someone who can be trusted by your community. Remember that participation is a great first step and much appreciated. Believe me, it does not go unnoticed by your community. Listening plays a big role in overcoming bias and becoming a more inclusive leader. To become a better listener, you need to show respect, keep quiet, and challenge assumptions. Let's break them down. When it comes to showing respect, the most effective leader equally respects the opinion of every member in their community and recognizes that good ideas come from people with different experiences. The leader solicitates those contributions and moderate discussions to ensure contributors are comfortable to share in the first place. When it comes to being quiet, inclusive leaders should know they do not have to always talk and they should let others speak. This does not mean you should be completely silent throughout the whole conversation, but when you see an opportunity for a person to freely elaborate on something they know about, you should give them that chance. This helps you get to know the other person better. Essentially, you want to be able to keep the conversation balanced with not having one of you dominate the conversation. When it comes to challenging assumptions, the best listeners are always on the lookout for assumptions being made in a conversation, including their own. They'll ask questions to gain clarity and not be afraid to let go of their own assumptions. This is important for making sure everyone is on the same page. One thing I will mention here is you should examine who is currently in your social circle. Usually we tend to have our inner circle of contacts filled with people who think and act like us. While it is good to have a group of friends you can easily relate to, we also need to know that the world is much bigger than our inner circle. The world has diverse viewpoints and perspectives, so to make sure we do not always get stuck in a single-minded perspective, we need to step outside of our bubble and interact with multiple groups of people. Here are some characteristics you can consider when it comes to diversifying who you interact with: ethnicity, age, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, education level, marital status, parents, political beliefs, socioeconomic background, abilities to do certain things, etc. And all of this is done to get to know multiple groups of people, understand their experiences in the world and any issues they face in society and how we can work together to solve them. Just make sure you are actively diversifying your social circle because you are genuinely curious about people's lives, not because you think they will teach you how to be inclusive with them or to personally check off a box on who you interact with. After all, people do not want to feel used for your personal gain or pleasure. In conclusion, becoming an inclusive leader starts with recognizing when good intentions are not translating into meaningful impact. Moving out of the unaware stage requires humility, accountability, curiosity, acknowledging biases, listening more than speaking, and being willing to question long-held assumptions about groups of people and other things in life. Real progress happens when leaders actively reflect, learn, and take consistent, informed action to ensure others feel genuinely valued, respected, and included. In the next video, we will proceed into phase 2 of the Inclusive Leader Continuum, Aware. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on the post notifications so you will be notified when I post my next video. I appreciate your support. Remember, you are powerful, you are capable, and you are the changemaker our society needs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you soon.